At the 3 C's, and you had a chance to write those down: continence, chastity, celibacy. Celibacy is not just not having sex. Okay, we were talking about that. That's what the priesthood is often thought of, or what celibacy is often thought of as, is just simply not having sex, but that's not the whole picture. It's also chastity. We want to watch this little interview here, and we may... well, let's just watch it, and I want you to... we'll talk about it when we're done. It's about 9 minutes long. It's got... The guys have British accents, so that's cool. Sky News in Britain. So it's about 9 minutes. Let's just watch this and see if anything jumps out at you. If you want to write something down that you want to ask a question about, or something like that, that would be fine, but we'll talk about it when we're done.
Amongst many of the controversial issues surrounding the official visit is the Catholic Church's ruling that priests should be celibate. Now, Pope Benedict is a firm believer in this, but for some of Britain's Catholics this is an increasingly outdated concept, and there are calls to allow priests to marry. Joining me now, Father Paul Keane. He's from the Catholic Voices Speakers Group. Good morning to you, Father.
Good morning.
And we have got the Times religion correspondent.
All right, let me get it loud here. Always whispering.
Here on Thursday, and amongst many of the controversial issues surrounding the official visit is the Catholic Church's ruling that priests should be celibate. Now, Pope Benedict, he's a firm believer in this, but for some of Britain's Catholics this is an increasingly outdated concept, and there are calls to allow priests to marry. Joining me now, Father Paul Keane. He's from the Catholic Voices Speakers Group. Good morning to you, Father.
Good morning. And
we have got the Times religion correspondent, and that is Ruth Gledhill. Ruth, good to see you. Father, for or against, or does the Pope tell you what to think on this?
Well, I've been a celibate now for 8 years, and they've been 8 very happy years. So I think that celibacy is a normal part of being a Catholic priest is a good thing. It first enables me to be entirely available. It gives me all my time to my work and to the people I serve. If I was married, my first duty, my first love should be and would have to be my wife, and if we were blessed, to my children. But there's also a deeper reason for celibacy besides being practical in my work. But also, we marry because we are attracted to someone, because we fall in love with them, because we want them to complete us, we want to complete them. The priest says, I'm going to embrace a certain loneliness in a way. I'm not going to remain not completed that way. I'm going to allow God to be the one who completes me. So in my ministry, I'm entirely focused upon him. I put myself aside to be entirely about his work and to be as well as I can to be with him in my ministry.
And I presume you're not the only religion, the Catholic religion is not the only religion in the world to do that. I mean, that would be a sort of...
There are many women and men, even not of faith, who see much worth in celibacy.
Yes.
You know, often we can be out there, can't we, in the market, almost selling ourselves, and many women and men have found actually standing back and having a time of celibacy has allowed themselves to appreciate themselves more.
Okay, well, let's get Ruth Gledhill in on all of this. What are you smiling about? You're not against celibacy, you're just against it being compulsory.
That's right. And in fact, not all Catholic priests have to be celibate, because many Anglicans are converting and taking their wives over with them. And in fact...
What, do they take their... And they're allowed sexual relations with their wives?
Well...
Can they not just stay married and be celibate?
I'm sure
like many marriages outside the priesthood.
One thing Father Paul said about Catholic priests having to put God first, therefore they don't have room for family, I would slightly dispute that, because I am the vicar's daughter.
Are you?
So my father's a priest, and I know from experience that God can be a competitor in a marriage between a man and a wife, but nevertheless a good Anglican priest is capable of putting both God and his family first in the priorities that they deserve. In fact, by putting God first, it enables you sometimes to be a better husband.
But you see, a lot of Catholics, and I speak as one, and Miss Jacqueline might speak as one as well, you see, I would identify with what Father Keane has said there, and I think the celibacy thing gives him a spirituality that a Protestant minister doesn't have?
Oh, but you see, my father was an Anglo-Catholic priest, and he had a very intense and deep spirituality. So again, it all depends upon the individual. Celibacy is a great gift, and it would be a terrible shame if it ceased to exist. But it's mandatory celibacy that is the problem.
That is the problem.
Yes.
Would you be, in any way, could you see room for that it's an option for a priest?
Well, Eamon, as you know, celibacy is a discipline, so the Church doesn't understand celibacy as being absolutely essential to Catholic priesthood. But it's been a practice now since the beginning of the Church. Sometimes people say it only began in the 11th century and it was all about...
It may be a practice, but Father, also people would see it as a problem as well. And are we mixing up two things here? Because a lot of people would say that celibacy is to do with all that paedophilia problem. Are there two problems here, celibacy and paedophilia? Are we mixing these two things up?
Absolutely. We know there's no connection. In fact, we know when we stand calmly back and look at the awfulness of priests having abused the vulnerable. When we stand back from that and actually look at the statistics, you see that Catholic priests are statistically less likely to hurt a child or a vulnerable person than, for example, a married man. We know that, sadly, most abuse happens in the family home. So they're two quite separate issues. I think where celibacy can become problematic for the individual is when he hasn't grown in how he lives celibacy. I mean, for me, what's really important is a good prayer life, so I remain anchored in God. I can't do this on my own. But also the importance of family and friends. I receive an appropriate intimacy from them.
Okay, look, I'm sure lots of people want to talk, and Jacqueline's here this morning. She's been getting so many emails on this, so you can both chip in.
And we still don't agree on this too, because I used to have my favourite priest. He didn't agree with celibacy, so I don't see any reason why priests can't get married. I think he was celibate, but that's what he thought. Anyway, Daniel, celibacy is such an outdated concept. It's not healthy. How can they give guidance when they have no experience of relationships? Jim Galloway, celibacy in priests is more historical than religious. It was all about keeping money in the church and not obviously sharing it with the family. Terry Evans, I think it must be difficult for them. It's not natural. I'm sure it impacts on their ability to minister. And Rebecca McGrath, who's a Villa fan, who's very sad this morning, has written in saying, we have a married priest in our parish with 2 kids and a wife. He used to be C of E. Somebody else tweeted and said the disciples weren't celibate, and Peter was obviously the first pope and he would not have been celibate. And Dave Kelly, maybe they should have their own TV show, I'm a celibacy priest, get me out of here.
Okay, let's get Ruth's view.
One of the terrible tragedies is the thousands and thousands of Catholic priests who've been laicized because they left to marry. And it's such their loss to the ministry is such a huge loss to the church. And these are priests who have both vocations, to be priests and to be
but that's
married.
like saying you join a golf club and it says no jeans, and they say, but we want to wear jeans. But you know the rules. Those are the rules. And they're the Pope's rules and the Vatican Council's rules, not their rules.
But wearing jeans is not a fundamental human need or drive, as arguably marriage and having children is for many people. And one of the tragedies is a lot of people, especially in previous generations when priests had a vocation at a very young age, they fall in love when they're much older,
but
and then you have this terrible bind.
I think what Father Kane's saying is that you're not like other men, and that's why you do the job you do.
I am like other men, I hope, but I've made a conscious choice, and I've made that choice over a number of years. It takes 6 years to train to be a priest. After 4 years, I took a year out because I wanted to focus upon thinking about this issue, and I asked, could I spend time in a parish? Because, of course, men must embrace this happily.
Father, at the end of the day, people want, when the Pope comes here this week, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Ruth, they want him to be very contrite, they want him to be very sorry, and they want him to apologise over this whole issue of child abuse. What do you think he will do? What do you think will happen? And what needs to be done?
Well, first, the Pope has done many times now. The letter he wrote to Ireland earlier in the year was very contrite. Also, he's met victims in Malta, in Australia, and in America. And in all of those visits, he has pointedly and from the heart apologised. It is possible that he may meet victims at the end of his visit. We've been very fortunate in England and Wales that we've had excellent child protection policy from early on. So, in fact, thank God, we've had few cases, and for only recently it said in the newspaper the church be held up as an example of good practice in this country.
I think I wrote that very passage, and that is the case. In England and Wales and Scotland, the problem was dealt with long before other parts of the world, and so the Pope this visit should be a good visit. He should be welcomed here, and the Catholics here deserve a good visit. And they shouldn't have to pay the price for crimes coming to light in other parts of the world at the moment.
Do they also deserve an apology, though?
The victims deserve an apology, yes, and I'll be surprised if no mention is made of it during the visit.
Folks, thank you very much indeed. That will get people talking this morning. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts, and thank you for those emails. Special programmes here on Sky News about the Pope's visit. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, there's one, and that will be followed by 4 days of full live coverage on the Pontiff's tour of the UK. After the break, we've got your sport. Give us a taste of that, Jack.
Yeah, well, action from the office about trials. A late show from Stoke in the Premier League. And a 50-year wait.
I could listen to British people read from the dictionary. So anyway, just a little, that was from this fall before Pope Benedict visited their country. A little intro to celibacy. Thoughts? Anything jump out at you? Questions or? Yes?
I just have a comment.
Yep.
When the host, I think it was, or the news anchor, I guess you could call him, said, like, that's the rules, that's the Pope's rules, that's the Catholic Church's rules. Me being a Catholic, I see it the same way. Those are the rules, and if you don't agree with them and you don't like them, then why would you even consider becoming part of the Catholic faith, even becoming a priest teaching the Catholic faith or proclaiming the Word of God in front of them?
Right. Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree 100%, obviously. And she said, the one lady said, my favorite priest disagreed with it. So she was like, that's proof that it's not a good idea. And I was just like, okay, whatever. But we have that a lot. This one priest, I get that all the time, actually, like giving homilies and stuff, and I'll talk about something that the church teaches, and then somebody will come back to me and say, Father, but I know this one priest that teaches differently. And I'm like, they use that one priest against the teaching of the church, and I'm just like, that just logically, that blows my mind that people think that way. But anyway, that's the state of things that we live in, I guess. Any other thoughts on it? Yep.
I don't know, I thought it was kind of interesting, the woman who said her father was an Anglo-Catholic priest. Like, I was under the impression that he was Anglican and then converted to be Catholic, and since he already had a family, was able to become Catholic. But she was like, yeah, he wasn't celibate and he was just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we're not saying that he's not fine because he was I don't think she understood the whole of it. Like, I feel like she kind of sounded like she was a little ill-informed.
Yeah, I think that the Anglicans are allowed to marry and be married as priests. And when they join the church, obviously they can become Catholic priests and so be married. There's about 200, I think, in our country, in the U.S. or so, and that number is growing, of married priests. The idea that it's, they said in there that it's compulsory or mandatory, a discipline of the church. I want you to make sure that you understand this. The Pope could come out tomorrow and say Catholic priests can once again can be married before they become priests. Okay, he could. It's a discipline of the church, and I want to make sure you understand that. Okay, this is a discipline of the church. It's something that is entered that could change. Okay, this is not the same situation as what we're going to talk about next class, which is the ordination of women to the priesthood. Okay, that is not up for change ever, and we'll talk about why next class. Okay, but tomorrow the Pope could come out and say that you can be married and be a Catholic priest. Okay, so it's just a discipline of the church. All right, now they talked in there about it's something that was done to keep money in the church. False. Okay, again, and you hear him reference the year that one priest said, yeah, a lot of times they talk about like it just started in the 1100s, right? Did you hear him say that? That's exactly what we're talking about, and we're going to get into that more. But again, people think, oh, this medieval thing that started so that we could not have to worry about wives taking money from the church and all this bunch of garbage. Okay, the disciples not being celibate. We're going to get to that. The disciples not, some of them being married before they became disciples. We're going to talk about that. Do you understand the problem that that would cause for the argument of celibacy? Yeah.
I wasn't going to answer your question.
Go ahead. Your own question.
They were saying that, like, you know, the church requires priests to be celibate.
Yeah.
Like, the church makes priests be celibate.
Right.
Well, no one tells you you have to be a priest.
Right.
All priests choose to be a priest and take whatever comes with it.
Right.
So if you're not a priest and you don't want to be a priest,
Yeah.
then really it doesn't affect you.
Right.
Like, if you're not going to be a priest, you don't have to worry about being celibate. Bada bing, there you go.
Yeah, like I think sometimes people talk about like all of a sudden priests are surprised on the day of their ordination to find out that they can't have sex. You know? No, I'm just saying that's how it's portrayed sometimes. Like priests just didn't go through seminary for 6 years where that was all that you talked about. Or not all that you talked about, but it was talked about a lot. The other thing that's important, pedophilia. Pedophilia. What's the relationship between pedophilia and child abuse? Or between pedophilia and celibacy that people are trying to make? Anybody understand that?
Were they connecting it with the whole priests have abused children?
Yeah, pedophilia is the abuse of children. So what's the connection that some people make with that and celibacy?
I guess they long to have sexual relations.
Yeah. You can't have sex as a priest, so you try and repress your sexual urge, and then you finally just act out and have sex with kids. Okay, is the thinking, I think, there. But again, the priest brought up a good point. Yeah.
Isn't pedophilia proven to be a disease? So if you wanted, if a priest was a pedophile, he would have been a pedophile like throughout his lifespan history. Like it's not new just because he doesn't have sex for a long time.
Right. Right. Yes, it is a mental thing, a mental illness type of a deal. But also, the priest raised a good point in here, which you can find the statistics on this. Priests are one of the least likely groups to abuse children. The highest group of people who abuse children, does anyone know what that is? Married men, fathers, okay, who are obviously not celibate. So to blame pedophilia on celibacy is pretty far-fetched, okay? Why would somebody, though, want the church to change its mind on celibacy? Why do people see a problem with celibacy? There are many.
Well, I mean, to like answer the first question, I mean, it can bring about like almost like a revolution of like changing other things.
Exactly. You're exactly right. It could bring about an era of revolution. Oh, we're changing everything. We're new now. It's a new, everything's up for grabs, and we're going to do away with the old things that we used to do. You're exactly right. They don't necessarily care if priests have sex or not, but they want their own agenda, the things they want to see changed. They're hoping, gosh, if we can get this going, then that will change too.
I was just going to say that maybe people that are thinking about going into the priesthood would want the best of both worlds, and they would also want the life of having a wife and children, but also be able to have that relationship with God that the priesthood allows them.
Right. Yes, and you talked about kind of, I think you're getting at vocations. People, what's the argument? Okay, do we have a number of the number of priests is well, it had been declining. Now it's actually on the rise again slightly, right? What's the argument about celibacy and vocations? Can anybody figure that one out? The number of priests that we have in our country. You know how we were losing priests, and people are blaming it a lot of times on celibacy. Here's the thing that you would say to that, though. There are vocation crises in faiths that allow their ministers to marry as well. Okay? And it's almost exactly the same kind of drop-off that we see. So it's not celibacy as much as it is other factors, which we can look at later. Okay? Everybody, if you stand up for a minute, stretch out. Council of Elvira, we started there. You need to 4th century. What does it say? Bishops and priests, no sex with their wives. Should anyone do so, let them be kicked out. Priests, bishops, deacons, no sex. Council of Elvira, 4th century. Okay? It says even if they're married. Right? It has good forbid the bishops and priests and deacons from having sexual relations with their wives to procreate children. Okay? You don't have to write the whole thing down, just the gist of it. Okay? Bishops, priests, deacons, no sex with your wife. If you do, you're not a priest or a bishop or a deacon anymore. Okay? Council of Carthage, 4th century also. Priests, bishops, deacons abstain from sex with their wives. Okay, got it. Excellent. Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? It's kind of off topic.
No problem.
Do you think that if people see like the loophole between like going from Anglican to the Catholic priesthood, that they would take advantage of it? I thought about that. I mean, stupid.
I guess, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to, I guess you could. Yeah.
The church would frown upon it, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the church would ask you to not do that. They would probably look at you, they would ask you, okay, you were Catholic for 20 years, then you joined the Anglican church, got married, and then now you're wanting to join the Catholic church. And so, I mean, they might ask you that. But again, I mean, I guess, yeah, if you wanted to.
Like, if your intentions were still good or whatever, would they let you join?
I would think so. I guess, yeah.
If you're married in the Anglican church and then become a Catholic, you're not married in the Catholic church, are you?
Yeah. I mean, you would, yeah. You would have to what you do is you get your marriage, it's called having your marriage validated by the Catholic Church. So I would assume that when you join the Catholic Church, you would get your marriage validated. Or it may be that if you, that would basically be what would happen.
I don't know. To me, if I were running the Catholic Church and
Running it?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
I saw that
Pope Amber?
Yeah, Pope Amber.
Okay.
And you were I don't know, you were Anglican and now you're Catholic and you're married, but you want to be a priest. Like, to me, no matter what, if you come into the church and you're married, I feel like that should just be off limits.
If you're Anglican or Episcopalian, and you get married and you join the Catholic Church, then you want to become a priest, no dice.
Oh, but if you are a priest in the Anglican Church and you're married and you want to convert to be a Catholic priest,
Exactly.
then it's okay.
Then that is allowed.
I still think that's a little sketchy.
Okay. Well, you can go join the Anglican Church, marry some guy, and then try and.
Can I ask you a question that's really not really off topic?
Why not? Yeah.
So what happens when a couple gets married in the Catholic Church?
Yep.
And then one of them decides to not be Catholic anymore and go to a different religion. What happens with their marriage then?
It would still be. I mean, it's still a marriage. The church still considers you married. Yeah. Because again, you think just questions about marriage. You should always think about what vows did you make. See, you said sickness and health, good times and in bad. All that stuff. So if they've taken a time where they get depressed, they cheat on you, they quit practicing the faith, all those things are still involved with good times and bad. So, yeah, church still considers you married. Okay? All right. Again, looking at the years of all these. Again, the myth is that this is starts in the year 1000 or 1100 in the Middle Ages. This is 386. A bishop can be married only once does not mean that he continue to want to have children. Okay, that's in 386. Talking about St. Paul's teaching. Yep. Yep. Whoop. Sorry. Okay, we looked at St. Paul. St. Paul says a bishop must be married only once. Okay? So in this synod, when this group of church gathering in 386 says, St. Paul said that, but he didn't mean that bishop would try to continue having children. Basically, continue having sex. Okay? Here's the case. Here, let me just show you what we're trying to get at. Okay? This is the point that I want you to understand about celibacy. It is not a medieval thing. It starts right from the beginning, and this was the situation. Married, okay? When you get to this spot in your life and you are ordained, sex stops. From the very early days of the church, they said this. You could be married. You could be married. Why were they taking people who, why is it not the case that they only let celibate men become priests then? Because they needed priests. No one was like waiting around who was 40 years old when Jesus is alive. Why haven't you married yet? Well, I'm waiting for Jesus to die and then raise and then institute the priesthood and then I'm going to become a priest. Okay, no one was doing that, obviously. Everyone's married. So they're taking, the priests are coming from this group of men who are married. But the consistent thing that you see from the very beginning, once you are ordained, even in the early church, you stop having sex. That's harder than what I did, I think. Okay? Which is never had sex in the first place. Okay? Me and my wife, we lived together for 20 years. We've had children. We've had sex as often as married couples have sex. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to say for the rest of my life, I'm not. That's pretty intense. For both people. Husband and wife. Right. Yes. If you, as a priest, if you've had sex some point in your life, you can still get ordained. Okay? Yes. You're right. I didn't mean to suggest that. For me personally, I didn't go through that. Yeah.
Then at this point, would they be considered celibate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because continence, you're living continently now, good question, and you're living chastely. Okay? So yes, celibacy then is something that even married men can do if they are living out this teaching of the church here. Okay? Yes. I know. I get my markers get wrecked every time. Let's see. Does this work? There we go. There we go. There's the dramatic underline. The dramatic underline in full color. All right? Okay, let's look at some other ones really quickly. Pope Leo the Great in 456. Yes. And a lot of times what happened in the early church was women, the women would either live in a convent and they would actually just stop living together, or the woman would become a nun, or they would still live together not having sex. Okay? Now is that to say, you'll hear stories, of course, throughout from the beginning where there were priests that are having sex. Okay, I know a priest from the seminary he was already a priest when I was in the seminary. He had an affair. Some woman, he was taking care of her. Her husband had just died, and she's emotionally vulnerable. He starts out taking care of her, maybe isn't totally aware of what he's doing, his feelings, and then all of a sudden, they're making out and whatever, and they slept together. He admitted it, and had to go through the whole process of making amends for that, and it was very public. Everyone knew about it, and the bishop eventually, sent him. He had to go away for some counseling and take some time off. Came back, bishop reinstated him. Okay, so you'll hear stories from the Middle Ages too. They had concubines and prostitutes. Okay, I'm sure there were priests that did that. Did every priest in the Middle Ages? No. Okay. Yes, there are always people doing wrong. Okay, there are just as right now, when people look back on our time, they're going to say, well, there were some priests who abused children. Well, yeah, that's true. Okay, not every priest. So it's important to kind of keep the stories that we hear in context. Oftentimes in history class, you go to a history class in college, they'll make it sound like, every priest had multiple prostitutes and it was just this absolute debacle. Okay, well, there may have been priests, there obviously were priests that sinned and were attracted to power and all that, but okay. Somebody had a hand up. Yes?
So when a priest does go against the celibate life, are they just suspended in a way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, really, it is a sin. It's a sin against the church, just as you would, you're a husband and wife. If the husband cheats on the wife, it's not like all of a sudden it's just like, oh well, you said sorry. There's that time. Now, if that's totally, but see, this is totally different. If a priest has sex with a woman, that's totally different than having sex with a child, which is a crime. When it's a crime, you're kicked out of the priesthood, and all that stuff, and even the church. So those are totally different things. I don't mean to make it sound like it's no big deal. But yeah, so there's a process that you have to go through of kind of making amends with the church when you do something like that, just as your wife would have a checklist that these are the things that need to happen before we all just pretend like nothing happened. Okay? Yes, if a priest commits a crime, he can be kicked out. If the priest commits a crime against a child, he is kicked out instantly. Now, if a priest gets caught stealing, that's different. I mean, you would still be responsible for that and go to jail or what, But in terms of the church, there are certain crimes that instantly lead to you being done as a priest. You can still if you abuse a child, you're never kicked out of the church. If you make amends and you can come back to the church, but you're done as a priest if you do that. Whereas if you have sex with a woman your age or adult, it's consensual, that kind of thing, you're still put on leave. You have to go through a process and all that stuff, but you're not kicked out of the priesthood instantly just for that. Okay?
What happens if a priest goes to jail?
I don't know. I guess whatever. He couldn't wear the collar anymore. He'd have to be wearing orange or yellow. Yeah, he's still a priest. Like if I was peacefully protesting, apostles went to jail. If a priest robbed a bank, I think we're getting a little off track from celibacy, but yeah, they would go to jail. They would still be a priest, yeah. The church wouldn't kick you out if you robbed a bank. The church wouldn't. There's no process for kicking the priest out for doing crime. Now, you'd still have a lot to do before your bishop would let you exercise your priestly office again.
A peacefully protest and then he goes to jail. What does he do while he's in jail?
Say mass, if you want. There's a story of a cardinal in Vietnam who was imprisoned for 15 or 20 years. People would sneak him wine, and he would have a drop of wine and a drop of water in his hand. And he'd have a breadcrumb, and he'd say mass basically on his hand in the prison cell. So, priests go to jail all the time. I think we're asking two different questions. You're saying if he goes to jail and it's not his fault, and I think Kayla's asking what if he robs a bank or something. For any reason? Yeah, you just whatever everyone else does in jail. But if you have a way to say mass, then some priests would say mass. What's that? Yeah. I think it would depend on what it would depend on if the prison let him. Yeah. Now, if I'm in jail because of abusing a child, then it's not valid because I've been kicked out of the church for that crime. I'm trying to think. I think that's the only crime that would instantly get me kicked out of the priesthood. Now, my bishop can call me at any time, even if I haven't committed a crime. My bishop can call me and say, you cannot practice your priesthood. So if I rob a bank, I would imagine that my bishop would call me and say, you're not preaching, you're not saying Mass for a while till we get this worked out.
And then what if you did?
What if you did? Then it wouldn't be valid. Yeah. Yeah. But if I'm in there as Martin Luther King, or something like that, and I'm protesting unjustly, I get put in jail, then the bishop, you can still say Mass and do all that. And if the prison lets you say it for the whole prison, then that's fine. Yep. Okay.